She was killed in her bed while her sisters slept feet away, and the answers as to who did it still remain. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Alicia O'Reilly. Viewer discretion is advised. Alicia May O'Reilly was born on December 30th, 1973 in New Zealand. At the time this case occurs, she is 6 years old and she has an 8-year-old sister named Juliet. And they live together with their mom in this house in New Zealand, which is in a suburb of Auckland, New Zealand. It's an area called Avondale. Also living in the house at that time was an 18-year-old boarder. I guess their name was Isabel, and she was there to help take care of the girls from time to time. Now, on the night in question, the two kids are there, as well as their mother, Nancy, Isabel, and Nancy and Isabel's boyfriends. It was August 15th, 1980. That night, everyone was out in the living room watching an episode of The Dukes of Hazzard. Nancy and Isabel had made dinner that night for their boyfriends. And by the time bedtime rolled along, Nancy would tell the two girls, go to your room and, get ready for bed. I'll be there in a minute. But Nancy and the other three adults in the house at the time, they got caught up on the TV show they were watching, and Nancy forgot to go to the room to say goodnight to the two girls. The night came and went. Everyone went to bed, and around 7:30 the following morning, Nancy woke up. When she woke up, this is a Saturday morning now, she walks out to the living room and she sees her 8-year-old daughter, Juliet, just kind of playing out there. Now, Nancy thought that was strange because Juliet was not usually the first one up of the two girls. Alicia was always up beforehand, and she would always, be out there playing. Nancy pokes her head into the girl's bedroom and she sees the lump of, a person sleeping in the bed covered up with the sheets. And she doesn't really think much of it at that time. She goes back out and starts, getting breakfast ready. At some point that morning, I guess a neighbor or friend named Jim came over to pick up some tobacco. I guess he had lent Nancy. And apparently this Jim person was close with the family. And so before he left, Nancy asked him, hey, can you go do me a favor and go check on Alicia, because she was, getting breakfast and stuff ready. And that is when Jim walks into the room, and that's when the nightmare begins. He says, Nancy, can you come here real quick? And they can see Alicia's arm, and they pick up her arm, and it felt very stiff, like it wasn't moving on its own anymore, basically rigor mortis, and she was cold to the touch. They pulled the sheets back and they see blood covering the sheets. 6-year-old Alicia was dead in her bed. They called the authorities and, rescue arrives, and they confirm that Alicia is no longer alive. The 6-year-old girl had not only been, suffocated. There was some trauma to her body. That's why there was blood. And she had also been raped. And all of this happened in her bed. And what was more chilling about this whole thing was that Juliet, the 8-year-old daughter, her sister, she was asleep in her bed when this occurred. And this was literally within feet of her bed. Someone got into that bedroom in the middle of the night while both girls slept, while all the adults were asleep, and someone murdered and raped a 6-year-old child without alerting anyone. I believe the police would determine that the point of entry was the window in the girl's bedroom. The curtains had been kind of askew, and it looks like that was just how the person got in. There was not a ton of forensic evidence in terms of fingerprints or shoe impressions or anything like that. They didn't really have any. Something they did have was that eventually they would find a few strands of pubic hair with Alicia's body that obviously did not come from her, would have come from her assailant. And they also had male bodily fluid, semen, found with her body. So obviously they are looking for a male as to who did this. Now, Alicia's father lives in Australia, so he wasn't there, but there were 2 adult men in the house that night. Both were allegedly asleep when this attack occurred. Now, in 1980, DNA had not become an actual forensic tool at that point, but they did keep all of that forensic evidence, thankfully. it got to a point where they were able to do like DNA typing from certain things. And when they did that, they did DNA typing against, and by DNA type, I mean their blood type. And they were able to eliminate the two men who were in the house that night from contributing to the pubic hair found with the 6-year-old's body. Initially, when they questioned Juliet, they asked her, because she was obviously in the room when this happened, did you see anything? Did you hear anything? Anything at all? And she said no. She was fast asleep. She was asleep during the entire attack. Which does beg the question, did whoever do this know the layout of the bedroom, knew there would be a second girl in there, and knew to be quiet enough to not rouse any attention from her? Unfortunately, Juliet was not able to provide any information. So the police go door to door. They question every single person. They are interviewing as many people as they can possibly get. And they got some tips and information, potentially some leads. One witness said they saw a strongly built Polynesian man about 1.8 meters tall had been seen outside the O'Reilly residence sometime around 6:30 in the morning, which would have been roughly an hour before Nancy had woken up. He was wearing an army-style jacket, dark trousers, and boots, and they came up with a composite drawing of a couple people that were also seen in the area, and they would distribute this composite drawing to everyone all over the news, but no one really recognized them. There was another man who lived in the area. He was a 23-year-old man who had suffered some severe brain trauma when he was a child. And so he basically had the permanent mental age of an 8-year-old. And so when he was questioned by police, he said he had nothing to do with whatever happened to Alicia, but he did say he had a dream or a nightmare about someone breaking into her house and killing her. He would give police his fingerprints, his DNA, his hair, semen samples, everything. He cooperated fully. Now, the blood type matched the same blood type that was found with her body, but later down the road, when DNA technology becomes more advanced, they were able to rule him out, that he had nothing to do with Alicia's murder. And it sounds like Nancy, the mom, she never thought that this person was responsible either. But they interview just a ton of people. They take DNA samples from hundreds of people. They have hundreds of suspects that they rule out. They look at this area, on a map. They have all of these different people who had been sex offenders in the area, who were in the vicinity of Alicia's home and would have been home at the time or in the area when this occurred. And one by one, they're able to basically pick each one of them off and say they had nothing to do with this. A few years go by, and Juliet is now, older. She's a teenager, and now there is this speculation that Juliet, being at such a young age when this occurred, people have begun to think that maybe she was in fact awake when this happened. Maybe she did actually see something, but it put her into such a state of shock that she just couldn't recall anything. It's something that happens frequently. And there was a point where they're like, okay, we can maybe do hypnosis or something to see if we can jog her memory. But unfortunately, another tragedy would occur. It was November of 1987, so this is about 7 years after the murder. Nancy and Juliet were in a car, and they were the passengers in that car, when another car just ran completely into them. The driver, and this was a drunk driver who ran into them. Sadly, Juliet, who was just 15 years old at the time, she died. And so if she had any potential information, if hypnosis could bring it out, that'll never come to fruition now. Nancy was injured, but she survived. But now she has this trauma of both of her girls gone. One of them murdered, one of them killed by a drunk driver. That's a level of grief that not many people experience, and I can't even imagine how that has to feel. The drunk driver, I know, was arrested and pled guilty, and he was sentenced to, a prison term. And as, the year goes by, after year after year after year, police are still not getting any further with Alicia's murder investigation. They just have nothing. They have the DNA, but they don't have anyone to link it to. And then another potential tragedy. As a cold case team is looking at this case, they realize we're missing a lot of the physical evidence. Somehow the physical evidence that would be like the DNA stuff was missing. And they went into panic mode, like, oh my God, we don't have anything now. But luckily, they found in an archive, they found a few pieces of evidence that still were viable samples for DNA. And now with modern technology, they're able to take those samples and they created a full DNA profile of this man who killed Alicia. But still, the problem is it's not matching anyone. Now that we have databases where you can plug a sample into a computer somewhere and it'll match to someone very quickly, they did that. They got nothing. No one in their system matched the DNA. And that's including a significant amount of sexual predators in the area, sex offenders, people who had been convicted of rape charges before. Didn't match any of them. And then recently, within the past couple of years or so, now this is in New Zealand, and here in the States, it's obviously different, but we had the whole Golden State Killer thing happen. And once that happened with that genetic genealogy using Ancestry.com type websites to trace DNA profiles to a certain family, well, that had become a very big thing very quickly here in the States. However, that's not really the case outside of the US. It's actually not a common practice even now to do that in other countries. But New Zealand, they heard about this. They saw this sort of breakthrough in which, because that helped catch the Golden State Killer, and they were able to prosecute the guy and everything. And so they figured, we can do this too. But they had to go up the legal chain to even get this considered to be done, because it wasn't really a law at that point that they were able to do that there in New Zealand. But thankfully, they won their case with this, and they were given approval to do that familial genetic genealogy testing with the DNA profile they have. And as of right now, I know they are still working on that, but it has not gotten them any leads, at least not that they have made public yet. They might have started to get like a narrowed down, thing here, but if they have anything, they're not making it public. But obviously they want to make sure they're doing this the correct way. They want to do everything by the book. They want to make sure they have their person. And so it may take time. Time that, Nancy probably thought would never come. But now it's there. It's within their grasps. If they can get this familial DNA processed and they can link it to a family, they could be catching this person very soon. Hopefully they're still alive. That way they can actually be prosecuted. But that's something that, time will tell. And unfortunately, they're just sort of playing the waiting game now. Because justice can still be done. Justice is out there. And maybe you know something. This is 45 or so years ago this happened. The killer would probably be at least in their probably 60s, if not a little bit older, depending on who it was, of course. But maybe you knew this person. Maybe you were afraid to say something because you were afraid they would attack you or kill you or do something bad to you or your family. But now you're no longer a part of that person's life. You can come forward. They have the option where you can report information anonymously, so that way you don't have to actually reveal who you are for your own safety. But if you know something, if you saw something, you have got to say something. Somebody somewhere out there has got to know the truth about what happened to Alicia O'Reilly on that night in 1980. And perhaps that someone is you. The DNA is still a potential, to help catch this killer, but you may play a pivotal role. If you can confirm, help confirm the suspect for DNA. Maybe you can move the case quicker if you give them a name. So if you know anything, please come forward. The case file number is 800-816/3613. You can call 105 and quote Operation Sturbridge, or the case number. And you can call Crime Stoppers there in New Zealand at 0800-555-111. A 6-year-old girl was asleep in her bed, and she was brutally raped and murdered while her sister slept feet away, while her mom was in a bedroom right across the hallway. This person broke into the home and did this. This may be a stranger, this may be someone the family knew, but this is a 6-year-old child who did not get to continue living, did not get to grow up, did not get to do all the things that kids got to do, teenagers got to do. She doesn't get any of that. Her mom lost both of her children in 2 separate tragedies. And her mom is still fighting like hell to get answers and to get justice for Alicia. And so hopefully one day very soon, Alicia O'Reilly will get the justice she very rightfully deserves. But that is it for this case. True crime, a Rooney, Dooney, Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell multiple true crime stories here on YouTube every single week. So please subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment. That way more people see the video. Share the video if you like. Hit the bell so you're notified of when I post new videos. Please watch the videos all the way through to the end because it helps a lot. And I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. That link to my TikTok is in the link tree, which is in the description of this video below. So feel free to follow that if you like. And then also in that link tree, you'll find my case list, which has over 7,000 names on it. It's alphabetical. If there is a case you want me to cover and you do not see it on that list, because you can see it if you want to, just send me a quick email, which is also listed below. All I need to know is the name of the case, where it happened, and when it happened. I'll add that name to my list, and then I will cover it at some point. I do pick my cases typically at random. However, if you are a loved one to a murdered victim or a missing person, maybe the case isn't solved yet, let me know you are a direct family member and I can make sure that case gets a higher priority. Otherwise, I just pick the cases at random. But that is it for this video, True Crime Rooney. So until the next case, ta-ta for noweth. If. I don't know why I did that. Okay, bye.